I adjusted my simple black dress one last time as I walked through the gleaming marble lobby of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, trying to steady my nerves for what would either be the most humiliating or most satisfying night of my life. The reunion was 3 hours away, but the familiar weight of judgment had already returned, just like when I was 17. My grandmother's simple gold chain, the only nice jewelry I wore, caught the light from the crystal chandeliers above. Tonight, after 2 decades of letting people believe I was still that same failure who dropped out senior year, everything was about to change forever.
"Well, well, well, look what the cat dragged in," came a voice I recognized immediately from my nightmares. Jessica Monroe stood near the hotel's registration desk, her designer handbag, a $5,000 Louis Vuitton, clutched like a weapon as she looked me up and down with practiced disdain.
"I can't believe you actually showed up, Emma. Don't you have a job interview at McDonald's or something?"
Behind her, Madison Phillips and Brittany Walsh nodded in agreement, their matching Tiffany tennis bracelets glinting under the lobby lights. The 3 of them had ruled our high school with an iron fist, their parents' money, buying them everything from designer clothes to college acceptance letters. 20 years later, they still moved like a pack, still fed off each other's cruelty like vultures. "Jessica's right," Madison chimed in, not bothering to lower her voice as other reunion attendees walked by. "I heard you're still living in your grandmother's basement. At 38. Isn't that just sad?" I kept walking toward the elevator bank, my simple flat silent against the polished marble floors. The elaborate lobby was certainly impressive, though I'd always preferred simpler designs myself. "Emma Thompson," another voice called from across the lobby. I turned to see 2 women approaching, Amy Rodriguez and Lisa Williams, once my closest friends, now distant shadows of who they used to be. They wore tailored suits that screamed success, their smiles bright but somehow hollow. "We heard you were coming tonight," Amy said, her voice carefully neutral. "It's so brave of you to show up, considering everything."
Everything. The polite way of saying my life had fallen apart, that I'd thrown away my future, that I'd become exactly what everyone expected from a girl with no money and no family support.
"We saved you a seat at our table," Lisa added, though her tone suggested it was more charity than friendship. "It's not at the head table, obviously, but it's decent. We figured you might not have been able to afford the full reunion package anyway."
The full reunion package. $400 per person for dinner, drinks, and a night at the hotel where successful people could display their achievements to classmates who'd struggled more. I'd heard the reunion committee had managed to get a good deal on the venue, though no one had bothered to tell me the details.
"That's very thoughtful,"
I said quietly, checking my simple watch. 2 hours and 45 minutes until the dinner began. Somewhere upstairs, the hotel staff was probably putting the finishing touches on what promised to be an elegant evening.
"You know,"
Jessica said, moving closer with her conspiratorial whisper,
"we were all talking earlier about how different everyone's lives turned out. It's amazing what 20 years can do." "Amazing indeed. 20 years of hard work while everyone thought I was wasting away in my grandmother's basement. 20 years of taking care of business while my former classmates climbed corporate ladders and married for status.
I mean, look at this place." Brittany gestured around the lobby with obvious envy. "Can you imagine owning something like this? The Grand Metropolitan must be worth what? 50 million? More?" I nodded along with their conversation, not really sure what to say to that.
"Some people are just born lucky," Madison said with a sigh. "Born into families with connections, money, opportunities. The rest of us have to make our own way."
The irony was almost too much to bear. Madison Phillips, whose father had bought her way into Yale. Brittany Walsh, whose trust fund had funded her successful art gallery. Jessica Monroe, whose husband's family business had handed her a vice president title she'd never earned.
"Speaking of work," Amy said, "what are you doing these days, Emma? For money, I mean."
For money. As if that was the only measure of a person's worth. "I manage properties," I said simply, which was technically true. Oh, like a superintendent? Lisa asked with barely concealed pity. That's actually perfect for you. I remember you were always good with your hands, fixing things. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see catering trucks arriving with what looked like an elaborate dinner setup. Someone had certainly spared no expense for tonight's event. You should see Lisa's house, Amy said proudly. A 15,000-square-foot home in Westchester, custom everything, professional decorator, infinity pool, her husband's law firm prints money. And Amy just bought a vacation home in the Hamptons, Lisa replied. $2.5 million right on the water. We'll have to have you over sometime, Emma, when you can get away from whatever it is you do. I excused myself and walked toward the restrooms, past displays of fresh flowers that looked expensive. Someone had clearly put a lot of thought and money into making tonight special. In the restroom, I took a moment to collect myself and check my appearance. Tonight felt important somehow, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was just the chance to finally put high school behind me for good. I walked back toward the lobby, where more classmates were arriving for the cocktail hour. I could see Jessica holding court near the bar, probably telling stories about her successful marketing career that consisted mainly of spending her husband's money on advertising campaigns that rarely worked. Emma! A man's voice called from across the room. I turned to see Mike Davidson approaching with his usual confident swagger. In high school, he'd been Jessica's boyfriend and the star quarterback who'd made my life miserable whenever I crossed their path. I heard you were here, he said, his voice carrying that same entitled tone that had once made me feel so small. Still keeping busy cleaning up after other people, I assume? Mike had married into money. His wife's family owned a chain of car dealerships, and he'd parlayed that into a comfortable life selling insurance to people who didn't really need it. Something like that, I replied. Well, good for you for staying employed, he said with patronizing approval. Not everyone can handle the pressure of the business world. Sometimes simple is better. Simple. The word they always used when they wanted to make failure sound like a choice. The cocktail reception was in full swing now, and I could hear the familiar sounds of people trying to impress each other with stories of their successes. Stock portfolios, vacation homes, children at private schools. All the markers of a life well lived, according to their standards. Oh my God, Emma! Jessica's voice cut through the crowd as she approached with a fresh martini. I just remembered the funniest story about you. Remember senior year when you had to drop out because you couldn't afford the graduation fees? We all felt so bad for you. They hadn't felt bad. They'd laughed about it for weeks, turning my family's financial crisis into entertainment for their social circle. And then you just disappeared, Madison added, joining the conversation with obvious delight. No college, no career, just gone. We always wondered what happened to you. What happened was that I'd spent every day for 6 months taking care of my grandmother while she died slowly of cancer. What happened was that I'd used the small inheritance she left me to start over, to build something better than what I'd lost. Well, you're here now, Brittany said with false brightness. That's what matters, even if some of us have traveled a little further than others. 1 hour and 30 minutes. I checked my watch again and noticed the hotel manager, Robert Chen, no relation despite the shared last name, making his way across the lobby with a folder in his hands. He was heading toward our group, probably with the final paperwork I needed to sign for tonight's event. You know what the best part about these reunions is? Amy said, clearly enjoying herself. Getting to see how everyone turned out. Some people really found their calling, and others. She trailed off, looking at me with obvious pity. Others got exactly what they deserved, Lisa finished with a satisfied smile. The main dining room was open now, and people were beginning to move toward their assigned tables. I could see elaborate centerpieces and elegant table settings that looked like they cost more than most people spent on their entire weddings. Ladies and gentlemen, the hotel's event coordinator announced over the sound system. Please begin making your way to the grand ballroom for dinner. We have a wonderful evening planned for you. The evening dripped with expense. Someone had gone all out. Robert was getting closer now, weaving through the crowd with that folder of papers. I could see Jessica watching him approach, probably assuming he was here to collect payment for the evening's extravagances. "Emma," Robert called out as he reached our group. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need your signature on these final receipts for tonight's event. The catering invoices, the champagne order, the floral arrangements, everything you approved for the reunion." The group fell silent. Jessica's martini glass froze halfway to her lips. Madison and Brittany exchanged confused glances. Amy and Lisa stared at the folder in Robert's hands as if it contained nuclear secrets. "Of course," I said calmly, taking the pen he offered. "The total came to what? $350,000 for everything?"
$362,000, including the gift bags and the open bar extension you requested," Robert confirmed. "Quite generous of you to cover all of this for your classmates."
I signed with steady hands. They watched in the kind of silence reserved for funerals. The only sound was the scratching of my pen across expensive paper and the distant music from the ballroom where people were celebrating with champagne I'd provided.
"Oh, and Mrs. Thompson,"
Robert continued, apparently oblivious to the shocked faces around us.
"The property management team wanted to confirm tomorrow's meeting about the downtown renovation project. The Anderson building purchase should close next week, and we'll need your approval on the restoration budget."
"Thank you, Robert," I said, handing back the signed documents.
"And please make sure the staff knows they're getting their usual performance bonuses for tonight. Exceptional service deserves exceptional compensation."
As Robert walked away, the silence stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. Jessica's face had gone completely white. Madison was staring at me as if I'd just spoken in a foreign language. Brittany's expensive bracelet clinked against her glass as her hand shook. "What just happened?" Amy whispered. I looked around at their confused, shocked faces and felt something inside me shift. 20 years of letting them believe I was nothing. 20 years of listening to their condescending remarks and pitying looks. 20 years of hiding the truth. Because I'd thought it was better to stay humble. To let my work speak for itself. "What happened," I said quietly, "is that you just discovered who's been paying for your evening."
"Paying for—"
Lisa started, then stopped as the implications hit her. "The hotel, the dinner, the open bar you've been enjoying all night, it's all been provided courtesy of Thompson Properties, my company." Jessica blinked first. "Your company?" "Emma, you're joking, right?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the Thompson Properties website, with my photo prominently displayed as founder and CEO. "I've been building a real estate empire for the past 20 years, started with one duplex, and built it into a portfolio worth just over $1 billion. The number hit them like a physical blow. Madison actually took a step backward. Brittany's martini glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor. "This hotel?" I continued, gesturing around the elegant lobby. "I own it. The shopping center where you probably parked tonight? I own that too. In fact, I own most of the commercial real estate in the city, including the buildings where several of your offices are located." Amy was shaking her head slowly. "That's impossible. You dropped out of high school. You live in your grandmother's basement." "I bought my grandmother's house when she died," I corrected. "Renovated it, turned it into my first rental property. I've been living there because it's paid for and it reminds me where I came from. But I also own a penthouse, downtown, a beach house in Malibu, and a ranch in Montana." "You're lying," Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. I scrolled through my phone and showed them recent photos from Forbes magazine, where I'd been featured in an article about female entrepreneurs. Thompson Properties has been quietly buying and developing real estate across 3 states. We employ over 200 people and manage assets worth approximately $1.2 billion. The Forbes article included photos of my various properties, my corporate headquarters, and a detailed breakdown of my company's growth over the past 2 decades. Jessica stared at the screen as if it might explode.
But you're a dropout, Madison protested weakly. You don't have a degree.
You're right, I agreed. I learned construction, property law, and business management through experience. While you were all spending your parents' money on college parties, I was buying foreclosed houses and learning how to turn them into profitable investments. Lisa was frantically scrolling through her own phone, probably Googling my name and company.
Holy shit, she whispered. Emma, you're actually famous. There are dozens of articles about you.
Industry publications, I confirmed. I tend to keep a low profile. I've found that people reveal their true character more honestly when they don't think you have anything they want. The truth of that statement hung in the air between us. For 20 years, they'd shown me exactly who they were. Cruel, shallow, obsessed with status and appearances. And I'd let them, because their contempt had been a useful shield while I built something real. So when you said you manage properties, Amy trailed off. I own them, I finished. Hundreds of them. Office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes, luxury hotels, including this one, where you've been enjoying my hospitality all evening. Brittany was still staring at the broken glass at her feet.
You paid for all of this? The food, the drinks, everything?
Everything, I confirmed. I wanted tonight to be special. I wanted you all to have the kind of evening that would make you feel successful, important, worth celebrating. Why? Jessica asked, and for the first time in 20 years her voice held no trace of mockery. Because I remember what it felt like to be dismissed, to be written off, to have people assume I'd never amount to anything. I didn't want anyone else to feel that way tonight. I looked around at their shocked faces, seeing them clearly for the first time since high school. Without their armor of superiority, they looked smaller somehow, more human. But I also wanted you to understand something, I continued. Success isn't about the college you attended or the family you were born into. It's not about having the right connections or the perfect resume. Sometimes, it's about being written off so completely that you're free to build something extraordinary while everyone's looking the other way. The hotel manager approached again, this time with a nervous expression.
Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but there's been a small issue with the dinner seating. Some guests are requesting to be moved to your table.
Of course they were. Word was already spreading through the reunion about who I really was, and suddenly everyone wanted to be associated with the girl they'd spent the evening mocking.
That won't be necessary, I said calmly.
I think I'll skip dinner tonight.
But you paid for everything, Amy protested. You should be the guest of honor.
I got what I came for, I replied. 20 years of wondering if I'd made the right choices, if dropping out and taking risks had been worth it. Tonight answered that question. I started walking toward the hotel's exit, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Jessica? You mentioned earlier that some people are born lucky. You were right. I was lucky enough to be born poor, lucky enough to be underestimated, and lucky enough to have people like you motivate me to prove that success comes from work, not from the circumstances you're born into. As I walked away, I could hear them calling my name, their voices no longer holding any trace of superiority. But I didn't look back. I'd spent 20 years proving myself to people who'd never been worth impressing in the first place. The next morning, I woke up in my grandmother's house, my house, to find dozens of friend requests on social media and several messages from classmates who'd suddenly remembered how much they'd always liked me. But the most interesting message came from the Forbes journalist who'd written about my company.
Emma,
the email read,
we've heard about what happened at your reunion last night. We'd love to do a follow-up piece about the importance of authentic success versus inherited privilege. Would you be interested in an interview?
I deleted the message without responding. I'd spent 20 years building something real while other people built facades. I didn't need their validation anymore. 3 months later, I stood in the conference room of my downtown headquarters, reviewing plans for our latest development project, a mixed-income housing complex that would provide affordable homes for working families. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mrs. Thompson, you have a call from Jessica Monroe. She says it's about a business opportunity." I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds, then shook my head. "Tell her Thompson Properties isn't taking new clients at this time." Some opportunities, no matter how profitable, simply weren't worth it. That afternoon, I drove through the neighborhood where I'd grown up, past the small house where my grandmother had taught me that worth wasn't measured by what others thought of you, but by what you built with your own hands. The house was beautifully maintained now, home to a young family who reminded me of myself at their age, full of dreams and determination. I'd learned that the greatest revenge isn't proving your worth to people who never valued you. It's building a life so fulfilling that their opinion becomes irrelevant. The girl they'd written off as a failure had become a woman who owned the very ground they stood on. But more importantly, she'd become someone who lifted others up instead of tearing them down. And in the end, that wasn't just success. It was freedom.